Hello and welcome to this edition of Art Smart. Today we're going to do a drawing lesson and our focus is going to be on endangered animals. We're going to do it with a crayon watercolor resist method. So the materials you're going to need for this lesson today are some watercolor paints. You can use either liquid watercolors or you can use a regular watercolor paint palette, such as this. Also some oil pastel crayons, some paintbrushes, and some water. And also some images from the internet. Since we're doing endangered animals, I chose a sea turtle to do for today. So I printed a sea turtle and some of the elements in the habitat. All right, to start this lesson today, we're going to draw the sea turtle. So what you need to do is choose an endangered animal that you're interested in. And I like to do it on a large piece of watercolor paper, but you can do it on a much smaller scale. So I'm going to choose green to draw my sea turtle. You can do this in pencil first if you're a little nervous about wanting to erase. This lesson would be perfect for maybe like a 3rd or a 4th grade student. Okay, so we're going to go around and do the body first. And do the animal as large as you can on the paper. It's okay if the animal comes off the paper a little bit. It can be cropped. Okay, now the interior of the shell, I'm just going to make a line going around, just for a little more details on the shell to make it more interesting. Okay, and then some big patterns on the shell. You don't have to do it exactly like the internet image. You can just draw some organic shapes on the turtle's shell. Okay, now let me add in the eyeball. I think I'm going to make mine a girl. Some little eyelashes. Okay, so now I'm going to take another color and I'm going to color in some of these spots. When we do the crayon resist method, we're going to go over it with watercolor, and whatever we didn't color is going to fill in with the watercolor. So you want to color in the spots that you want to stay bright with the oil pastels. So for instance, I'm going to color in these spots on the shell with I'm going to use the light green. In the Crayola case, this is called yellow green. You can do this with crayons as well, but I prefer oil pastels. They're a little bit faster because they're thicker and they block the watercolor a little bit better. So I'm going to color just a little bit of this outside shell as well. The wax in the oil pastels or in the crayons, if you're using those, is what blocks the watercolor. So there's little spots on the feet and arms on this picture I have, so I'm just going to add some little dots. And maybe just a few on the head. Okay, now I'm going to take the black and go over so that my guy doesn't have a green eye here. Go over that with the eyelashes. I guess you could give him a smile if you want, but it doesn't look as realistic to me. All right, just a little bit more add on here before we start the coloring with the watercolor. I just want to give this a little bit more definition on the outside of the shell. The turtle shell has a lot of organic shapes. The difference between organic and geometric shapes is they're not as rigid. They're not a perfect square or rectangle. Okay, now I'm going to work on the background for our picture. I'm going to put the sea turtle in its habitat. So its natural habitat would include coral reefs, which are also endangered. Here are some examples of some coral that you can put in, and just a different version of some coral. And also the sea turtle and its complete environment, including the coral reef and some fish and starfish and other things that live under the sea. Okay, so I'm going to choose like a red, bright colors for a coral reef. So I'm going to use this red-orange to do this coral right now. And it can go behind the sea turtle, in front of it, and you don't have to do it exactly like the image. And then on this paper, because we're going to color it in with watercolor after, I'm going to make just some little marks on it to make it look a little more textural. Coral is kind of rough, so we want to make it seem like it's a little rougher and not so smooth. Whatever marks you make here are still going to remain once you put the watercolor on. Okay, now I'm going to make, I'm going to attempt to make this coral, but I'm not going to make it green because our sea turtle is already green, so I'm going to go with something a little snazzier. We will go with, I think, orange. I wish I had hot pink, but I don't. Oh. Maybe this color. I'm going to use this kind of violet color. That's more fun. Okay. For this, like small circles, and then they sort of just come down like this. I'm just going to make a bunch of them. And a little bit of texture on there again. There's really no right or wrong. Just some little scribbly marks to make it look rough. All right, and then I'm going to put at the bottom a little bit of sand. So I'm going to use this like beige color just to put a little sand on the bottom of my coral reef. And again, just some kind of scribbles in the sand to make it look a little more natural. You could color in the entire sand if you want. Maybe add a little bit of brown in that sand too for a little definition. Okay, now in the water, I'm just going to make a little bit of some squiggle marks just to show the movement of the water. So I'm going to take this color, this one is called sea green, how appropriate, and I'm just going to make some like squiggle marks in the water, and they're going to show when I paint the water. Just go crazy, have fun. Make sure you press down kind of hard with the oil pastel. If you do it too lightly, it's not going to leave the mark once you paint. Okay, good? I think so. All right, now is the fun part. Okay, you want to just shake any remaining particles off so the oil pastel is not still on there. What you want to do with these watercolors that are liquid watercolors, you want to wet the paper first. The section that you're going to paint, you need to wet first just with regular water, and then you're going to drop this on top and spread it around. These are really fun. So we're going to do the inside of the shell first, just as a little sample. So what I'm going to do is wet the inside of the shell. You can paint right over your oil pastel. Doesn't have to be perfect, just wet it. That's why watercolor paper works best, so your paper doesn't rip. If you use like thin copy paper, the paper is going to rip when you go to wet it this much. So use the heaviest paper that you can get your hands on. Okay, now you can mix colors. I'm going to use a little bit of green and a little bit of yellow. Okay, here we go. All right, I'm going to put a few drops on here and a little bit of green. Okay, then I'm just going to kind of mix it around. I'm going to put a little more yellow. Kind of like that yellow. It's a good contrast to the green I already made on the shell. And then I could go back and, because the paint is not on the spots on the shell, I could go back in and make them darker if I want, if I feel like there's not enough contrast. You can fill in the little spots, the white spots that are left on the shell here. Okay, now I'm going to use the same yellowy color to do the feet and the arms. Wet it first. It's okay if your brush has a little bit of color on it. And the head and the last leg or arm. Okay, now I'm going to use this yellow and a little bit of green. It's okay if the green or the yellow gets on the part where the ocean is, because you're going to have those colors in your ocean anyways. The paint should not go past the line that you made if you made it push down hard enough with the oil pastel or the crayon. It forms like a little barrier, like a blockage, so it doesn't leak into the other parts of your picture. Okay, there's a little drop there. It's okay. All right, so the turtle is now painted, so you don't even have to wait to do the next part. You could color the sea right away or the coral. I think I'm going to go for the coral next. Do the small parts first, and then we'll do the larger part last. So you don't have to also do it the same color that you painted it. So I painted this I drew this coral with red-orange, but I can color it in with like pink if I wanted, or regular orange, purple. It doesn't really matter. Your choice. Let's see. I think I'm going to go with orange. And I think I'm going to add a tiny bit of red too. Whoa, or a lot of red. Like that. You might want to dab it off a little bit, because the only problem is when you color your C, the rest of the C, it's going to bleed a little bit into it, unless you want red in your C. So I'm just going to dab it a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to color this other coral. That'll dry. It'll look cool once it's dry. All right, and then this other one, I'm going to paint with magenta. Water first, and then drip a little bit of this on there. See how it's staying right in those corals? You could put a tiny bit of orange. That might look kind of cool, or maybe yellow. And it's bleeding into the turtle a little bit, but that's okay. All right, now we're going to do the background, the sea. So there's a turquoise color. If you're using liquid watercolors, there's a turquoise that I really like, and there's a regular blue. So you could blend them both. You could even throw a little bit of yellow in there, or green. Wet the whole thing first. It's okay, my brush is a little bit red from this water, but not a problem. I'm going to do just this section first so the water doesn't dry, and then I'm going to go to the other section and paint that section. Turquoise blue. The squiggles that we made in the sea at the beginning are showing right now because the crayons, the crayons are made of wax and it forms a resist. When you're doing large mass areas right like this, it's better to use a fat brush. Okay, I'm going to wet the other side and do this part of the paper before I get into these little details under here. Try not to get too close to the turtle because it'll blend whatever's left over in the color of the turtle into your water or your coral. Okay, going with a little turquoise blue again. It's my fave. You don't need much, it spreads pretty easily. Liquid watercolors don't come off your clothes that well, so be careful if you're painting at home. Look at those swirls, super cool, right? Just adds a little extra cool texture in the water. So my coral bled into my turtle's leg a little bit, but I think it's kind of cool, so I'm going to leave it. You could blot it out with a paper towel if you didn't like it though. Okay, now I'm just going to wet these little tiny areas, see if I can get in those with the aqua to make it a little more finished looking. Gets a little tricky. You really should wait for the coral and your other parts to dry before you do this, but I'm impatient, so I'm going to do it now. Now, if you're satisfied with your painting, it can pretty much be done at this point. If you're not, if you would like to go back into it at all, you can go back over the oil pastels, like for instance the spots on here. But you can go back in here, make a little more definition on the circles if you want to, preferably once it dries, but if you want it to just have a little more definition. And you can also, once the watercolor dries, you can draw on top of the watercolors with the oil pastel if there's something you forgot to do, or if there's something you want to add. For instance, in the coral, if I don't feel like the little spots and the texture showed up enough, I can go back in there with like some purple or something that's going to have a little more contrast. Okay. And I'm just going to put a little bit of water on this bottom part and add just a little bit of brown. I just realized that there's a brown watercolor, so I'm just going to add a little bit. Do it lightly though, because you don't want really dark brown sand. Just dry your brush a little if you want to lift a little bit of it away, if you don't want it that dark. You can wet your brush and then dry it a little bit, and it lifts the paint off. Okay. That concludes our episode of Art Smart. Thanks for joining us. Ta-da!